Hey there, and welcome to a deep dive into a story that's captivated humanity for millennia, the biblical creation account. We're turning our focus specifically to Genesis chapter 2, diving into the nuances and layers that might surprise even those familiar with this foundational text.
It always fascinates me is how Genesis offers not one, but two distinct creation narratives. Chapter 1 paints that majestic, sweeping view of creation, but then chapter 2 draws us in closer, offering a more intimate glimpse into the creation of humankind and the world we inhabit.
It's true. Genesis 2 almost feels like a close-up lens, revealing details and layers you might miss on a first read-through. And speaking of details, one that's always intrigued me is how, even after creating the heavens and the earth, God rests. Not just a quick breather, but a full day of rest on the seventh day.
It's from this very act, of course, that we get the concept of the Sabbath, a cornerstone of Jewish tradition. It's a designated time for reflection, for connecting with the divine, for stepping back from the labors of creation. It makes you wonder if even the Creator takes a time out, what does that say about our own human need for rest and renewal in our always-on world? But I digress back to the story. Genesis 2 presents this striking image of God forming Adam from the dust of the ground. Dust. Such a humble origin for, well, us.
Absolutely, and that connection to the earth resonates with creation myths across many ancient Near Eastern cultures. What distinguishes the Genesis account, however, is the breath of life, that divine spark infused into humanity. It suggests we possess something unique, something that elevates us beyond the material world.
That divine spark, it's what makes us human, isn't it? But instead of leaving Adam in some random field, God places him in a garden. And not just any garden, but Eden.
And notice the detail. Eden is described as eastward. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, the East held profound symbolic weight, often representing a sacred direction, a realm beyond the ordinary.
It's like saying Eden isn't just geographically distinct, it's spiritually significant. This is no ordinary garden.
Precisely. And the text further emphasizes Eden's extraordinary nature by mentioning 4 rivers, including details about valuable resources like gold and onyx.
It's almost like we're given clues to a hidden treasure, which of course makes you wonder about the location of this mythical garden. Have scholars pinpointed it on a map?
While 2 of the rivers mentioned, the Tigris and Euphrates, are well-known landmarks, the Pishon and Gihon have proven harder to pin down geographically. Some scholars believe they might have been rivers that have since disappeared or changed course over millennia, while others see their mention as more symbolic than literal.
So the exact location of this paradise might be lost to history, but the imagery continues to captivate our imaginations. But Eden isn't just about geography, is it? It's about what the garden represents. What do you make of that?
You've hit on a crucial point. The garden, especially in the ancient world, wasn't simply a place to grow plants. It was a carefully cultivated space, often laden with symbolism. Think about it. A walled garden, a protected space, teeming with life and abundance.
And at the center of this abundance is Adam. But even with all this splendor surrounding him, the text tells us it is not good that man should be alone. And yet, before we even meet Eve, there's this curious detail about 2 very specific trees. It's not like your average fruit basket, is it? We have the tree of life, which, okay, I think we get. But then there's this other tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That one feels a little more loaded.
It's a phrase that sparked endless debate and interpretation. At its core, though, the tree of knowledge represents choice. It symbolizes the freedom to choose, even if that choice comes with the potential for suffering, for straying from that initial state of innocence.
It's interesting because God essentially gives Adam everything, this incredible garden, dominion over the animals, yet there's this one boundary, this one don't touch button.
Dominion, that's a loaded word, even today. What do you think that meant in the context of this creation story? It's not necessarily about absolute power or control, but rather about stewardship, about responsible caretaking.
That's a great point. It's more about harmony than hierarchy, wouldn't you say? But even surrounded by this abundance, Adam is still on his own. And I love how instead of just magically providing a companion, the text takes us on this little detour through the animal kingdom.
Yes. We see Adam engaged in this almost proto-scientific act of naming all the creatures. It speaks to our innate human capacity for language, for categorization, for wanting to understand and order the world around us.
Totally. That urge to classify and categorize, we're still doing it today, just maybe with fancier tools than Adam had at his disposal.
But despite being surrounded by this diversity of life, Adam is still alone. He's connected to creation, yet there's a sense of incompleteness.
Cue the love theme. Because here comes Eve, and her entrance is unique. Unlike Adam, who's formed from the earth, Eve is created from Adam's rib.
It's a detail that continues to fascinate and spark debate. Some interpretations highlight the biological connection, the shared origin of men and women. Others see it as a metaphor for the profound interconnectedness between the sexes, emphasizing their essential unity.
I've always found it fascinating how it emphasizes partnership. It's not just that she's made for him, but from him, highlighting a deeper level of connection than if they were both created separately. And the language Adam uses when he first sees her, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, it's like he recognizes a part of himself in her.
There's such tenderness and recognition in those words.
And then, of course, we have that striking, if somewhat awkward image at the end of the chapter, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed.
It speaks to a state of pure, unself-conscious existence, a sense of wholeness and harmony.
It makes you wonder what shifted. Where did that innocence go? What happened that made us?
Well, us. Yeah, it does feel like this story, even just these first few verses, they hold this mirror up to the whole human experience, don't they?
Absolutely.
Oh.
From creation to connection to that first hint of things, well, shifting. Genesis 2, it offers us a glimpse into such profound and enduring themes. No wonder this story still resonates with people across cultures throughout history. We're still wrestling with these same questions, aren't we? What does it mean to be human? What happens? What are the consequences of the choices that we make? And what is our place in this whole creation anyway?
And it's interesting you bring up those consequences because while we often focus on the Garden of Eden as Paradise Lost, it's also a story about knowledge emerging, about understanding that difference between good and evil, right?
Which circles us back to that idea of the Garden of Eden as a metaphor. If we see it as that representation of harmony, what are our trees of knowledge today? What is it that tempts us away from that sense of wholeness?
Oh, what a question. Is it that constant pull of limitless information, or maybe the pressure to achieve more, to acquire more things? Or is it just that we're constantly bombarded by choices, so many choices, and a lot of them come with consequences that we don't foresee?
It really does make you think, maybe our fall isn't just this single event, this one-time thing, but more like this ongoing process, this process of trying to figure out a world where knowledge and choice, they come with a price tag,
That's what's so brilliant about diving into these ancient stories, isn't it? They don't necessarily give us clear-cut answers, but they give us frameworks to understand how complex the human experience really is.
It's certainly been a fascinating deep dive today, wouldn't you say? We've unpacked so many layers of meaning, explored all this ancient symbolism, and I hope, at least I hope, we've sparked some new insights into this foundational text.
And more than anything, I hope it encourages our listeners to keep exploring these stories, to find their own meaning, their own relevance within them.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And we want to hear from you, our listeners. What resonated with you during this deep dive into Genesis chapter 2? Was there a particular detail or interpretation that stood out? Share those thoughts with us, and let's keep this conversation going.